First, I would like to thank and introduce our co-sponsors today. We have Daniela and Sydney from the Office of Sustainability, and then we have Nathan from Architecture Brigades. So thank you to both of you, and you can come up and help us.
Hey guys, how's it going? I just want to give a big round of applause to Jeanette for putting on this event. And then just a little bit about Architecture Brigades. What we are is an on-campus organization. It's a bunch of architecture and non-architecture students. We design and develop infrastructure for developing countries in Central America. And then we actually take trips down there. So our last one was to Honduras to go down and actually build it ourselves. So if anyone's interested in that, you can check it out at uscarchitecturebrigades.com or send an email to uscarchitecturebrigades@gmail.com. And then also the Entrepreneur Club, I just want to say a little thing about that. We're just starting up the Entrepreneur Club again this semester, and we're going to be having a lot of good entrepreneurship programs and courses, as well as investment competitions. And if you're interested in getting involved in that, just go to usceclub.com and you can sign up there. Thanks a lot. And I have a sign-in sheet for anyone who wants to be on the mailing list.
Hi everyone, thank you very much for having us here. We're very excited to see the number of people who are very interested in anything that's related to sustainability and going green. So it's great to see everyone here. My name is Daniela and this is Sydney. We're both from the USC Sustainability Office, and we're here just to let you guys know that there are multiple ways for you guys to become involved with the Sustainability Office. We've left some green little book notes with you so that you can visit the website. Sydney here will tell you a little bit more about the different ways that you can incorporate both your student organizations or yourself within the office. We do have a Green Office certification program that functions more or less like LEED certification, in that we give certificates to the different administrative offices on campus that are abiding by a certain degree or a certain level of sustainable operations. So definitely check out our website, find out a little more, and here's Sydney.
What's up, guys? On the little green cards that you've gotten, one of the things that you're going to be able to find on that website is all about not only the different initiatives that USC has been taking to go green. So one of the little headers that can drop down is all about the different water initiatives and energy usages, different essentially different aspects of the university that people often have questions about, saying, what is USC doing to conserve energy? What's the carbon footprint? A lot of that information can be found on there. What's also available on that site is some ways for people, both students and staff, to get involved with what's going on with sustainability at USC. There's a ton of different student organizations, and most of them are listed on there. And there's also a garden that is on Shrine Place that has its little page on there. I encourage you all to check it out, because there's a lot of good stuff going on, and the more people we have involved, the better it will be. So, enjoy.
So I just wanted to thank everyone again for coming. We meet monthly to have a speaker talk about innovative business solutions to global issues. So again, or not again, but we are the Society and Business Lab, and we're a center within Marshall. We offer an MBA fellowship program and an undergraduate mentoring program, and if we can have our fellows and mentors stand up here in the audience. Thanks for coming. We also offer 2 courses in social entrepreneurship, BA 491 in the fall for undergraduates, and BAP 591 for MBA students and graduate students that's going on now. I'd like to also recognize any faculty or staff that are here today. So if you are faculty and staff, can you raise your hand? Could you please introduce yourself?
I'm Amy Blumenthal. I work at Marshall's Office of Communications.
So it's Amy Blumenthal. Thanks, Amy. I also, before we start, want to introduce the lab staff. Again, I'm Janet. We have Professor Wertman here. He's our founder and director. Our office manager, Ryan Tischler, is in class right now, and Abby Pfeiffer Mandel is back from maternity leave. It's exciting, so she will also be joining us. So without further ado, we will go to about 1:30, open for questions, and I would like to introduce Asa and Kevin to introduce Steve. Thanks.
Thanks, Janet. thank you all for coming out. As Janet mentioned, Asa and I are MBA fellows with the Society and Business Lab, and we have the honor of introducing Steve this afternoon. Steve Glenn is here today to discuss his role with LivingHomes LLC. He holds a bachelor's degree with honors in organizational behavior from Brown University and received a scholarship for the Career Discovery Program in Urban Planning at the Harvard Graduate School of Design. Steve founded and served as the CEO for PeopleLink, a leading provider of enterprise e-community solutions, and was a founding partner of Idea Lab, a business incubation firm that raised over $1 billion in equity. Prior to Idea Lab, Steve worked for Walt Disney Imagineering as the co-director of the virtual reality studio and also co-founded Clearview Software, which was sold to Apple Computer, where he briefly served as marketing specialist.
As Kevin mentioned, Steve is the founder and CEO of LivingHomes LLC, developer of modern prefabricated homes designed by world-class architects that feature healthy, green materials and energy systems at a great price value. From Lego to prefab, LivingHomes represents the fulfillment of a lifelong ambition to create a company that aspires to wed profit and purpose by developing homes that make great design, functionality, and sustainable design practical and affordable. Glenn is also involved with a number of nonprofits. Prior to LivingHomes, Glenn worked for nearly 2 years with the William Jefferson Clinton Foundation, first managing the development of a $330 million program in Mozambique that provides care and treatment to over 350,000 HIV-positive individuals. He then managed the development of a childhood health initiative with the American Heart Association. Glenn was named the CleanTech CEO of the Year in 2008 by CleanTech Week and Environmental Entrepreneur of the Year in 2009 by the LA City Council and Faith to Green. I also had the pleasure of running into Steve this morning as he was moderating a panel at the Verde Exchange, excuse me. So please join us in welcoming Steve Glenn.
Well, it's a real honor to be here. I want to thank the various groups involved for inviting me. I love this campus. I'm a big fan of mid-century modern architecture, and you guys just have so much cool stuff. You know, honestly, I went to school in New England because, in a rare kind of pressing thing as a high school kid in general, I wasn't too in touch with too many things, as I hope is the case of most high school students are out on the wrong side of the bell curve. But I knew that if it was nice outside, I just wouldn't study. And I mean, I couldn't be inside, so, you know, thank you for coming. I wouldn't be. Although, not totally true, I would go to the free lunch programs, basically for the lunch. But honestly, oftentimes I found myself kind of inspired by the people who I heard speaking. So I hope you enjoyed the lunch, and maybe I'll inspire you if primarily you came for the lunch. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about how I got to do what I'm doing, but mostly for me the interesting stuff is what we do to really dramatically reduce the ecological footprint of our homes. There will be time for questions and answers at the end, but if you have a burning question, you can interrupt me. So this is me as a 5-year-old, I think, with blocks. And I used to make cities out of blocks, and I had Legos, and I would make buildings, and I had books on the case study architects, and I wanted to be Frank Lloyd Wright. Like, that was the first thing I ever remember wanting to be, was an architect. So I got to college, and I did a summer program in design, and I learned that I had neither the talent or temperament to be an architect, unfortunately. I also learned that, you know, he actually wasn't such a nice guy, so that, like, ceased to be an option. But fortunately, I learned about this guy. This is Jim Rouse. Rouse was actually the first guy to commercialize the development of the mall. That's Santa Monica Place, actually 1.0. Now it's been redesigned. They tore the roof off and did some other fun stuff. But actually, Frank Gehry was his longtime architect. They worked together for about 15 years. He was the architect of Santa Monica Place. In the 70s, he created the concept of the festival marketplace, which he did first in Boston. This is Faneuil Hall, and then he did Harbor Place, and then he did South Street Seaport in New York, and Harbor Place in Baltimore, a bunch of festival marketplaces across the country. In the 70s, he also created what many consider really the only planned city in the U.S., Columbia, Maryland. And for you new urbanism fans, he was doing things like walkable neighborhoods and localized schools and health facilities organized around neighborhoods. He was doing this a decade before Seaside. In the 80s, he started what is still today the leading supporter of affordable housing, the enterprise. They do about $1 billion a year in tax credits for affordable housing. So he got very famous doing this, was very successful. Oh, by the way, his nephew is pretty well known, little Hollywood moment, that's right, Ed Norton Jr., who was born in Columbia and is actually on the board of Enterprise and does, works with a nonprofit doing affordable housing in Africa. So Rouse helped me to appreciate a number of things. First, there are companies that successfully wed profit and purpose. So turns out Rouse was a deeply religious guy, and he really felt that it was his God-given responsibility to try to do good work with the things that he did. Now, he never talked about that to investors. To them, it was all about ROI, and for the most part, he did pretty well for his investors. But to employees, he talked a lot about how the things they were doing were really helping to create better communities. They were good for society. And frankly, that was probably a motivating factor for many of them, and I'll talk about that in a second. But what I liked about this concept, when I was in college, realized that I felt an onus to try to add value through my work. Now, mine wasn't based so much on a religion like Rouse, although there certainly is a spiritual component, but it more reflected a philosophy which I hope I mostly live, which is just golden rule. I try to treat others as I expect to be treated. And I recognize that there are people who work as teachers, healthcare nonprofits, who do that very directly every day in the work they do. They are helping to create better communities, better societies. But I felt drawn to commerce, and what Rouse helped me to appreciate is that there are companies where integral in that which makes a product or service successful are things that make that product or service purposeful, but where each agenda can inform and expand the other. And I said, that's kind of cool. Like, I'd like to do that someday. So let me actually kind of focus a little bit more on this concept, because I think it's relevant to your lunch and certainly relevant to what I'm doing, and I hope relevant to what you do or aspire to do someday. So what I'm not talking about when I say companies that wed profit and purpose are projects like Project Red, or even Ben & Jerry's, right? So Project Red, they've done essentially a marketing campaign which has a donation component with different companies who manufacture products. Apple's done it, Compact's done it, a number of other companies have done it, so you can get a special version of their product, it's Red, and part of the sale goes towards AIDS organizations. And it's great, and I'm totally psyched that they do that. But the products, there isn't anything different about the products that makes them inherently purposeful. Ben & Jerry's, a great company, sources locally, buys some organic products, certainly gives back to communities, pays living wages. But in my opinion, on the list of things that really need to be addressed in terms of world problems like higher fat content dessert, it's just not on that list. So again, I think they're a great company. I enjoy the product from time to time, but I don't think that there's inherently anything purposeful. From a betterment of society, I'm not taking away joyous, but my definition. So what I am talking about are companies like, products like the Prius, or what Whole Foods are doing, or Patagonia with organic apparel. Now, putting aside issues of, yes, hybrids are more expensive, and certainly Whole Foods is more expensive than many other venues that sell food. But these products companies have been successful. They are growing. The products they are offering are spreading. And so for me, that's an example of an enterprise or product that weds profit and purpose. And what's cool about this is, capitalism is incredibly efficient distribution mechanism, but it has absolutely no ethic. I mean, if there are rogue states that want to sell enriched uranium-238 and terrorists who want to buy it, it'll help them set pricing and find each other as efficiently as people who want hybrids. I mean, there's no ethic inherent to the system. But what's cool about that is if you can create a profitable enterprise, and it's never easy to create a profitable business, but if you can, then that business can grow, can sustain itself, can expand, and whatever beneficence is integral in that product or service gets to spread. And so I kind of like that concept. And oh, by the way, I mentioned earlier about Rouse with his employees. There's actually been some great research that has suggested, if you've read Good to Great, by Jim Collins, who's a professor at Stanford, who's done a lot of research into what makes good companies great, defined as companies that exceed their peer competitors over a sustained period. It's not a charismatic leader like Steve Jobs or very high-growth industry like high-tech. It's employees who actually believe in the greater good behind their product. So, in fact, there's even a profit imperative to doing this kind of stuff if indeed it makes the people who work for you feel better about what you're doing or makes you feel better about what you're doing. So that's a little bit about profit purpose, which, frankly, last year, for the first time, LivingHomes started experiencing. I'd like to think we've been developing responsible housing, but last year we had our first profitable year. So finally, we're doing profit and purpose. So the other thing I concluded studying Rouse was developers are more important than architects. Are there any architects or people who aspire to be in the room? Cool, and developers are more important. The reason is developers hire you or they don't, and they allow you to do cool things or they don't. If the built environment, it's controlled by the people who have land, budget, there it is. It's not the architects, except when an architect's a developer, which happens more and more, which is great. But if you care about the quality of the built environment, that's a developer problem. So I said, I should become a developer someday. A, I have no talent to be an architect. B, developers are more important. And C, I concluded that the world could use more responsible developers like Jim Rouse. So that's sort of how I got to this. And you heard this stuff, so just very briefly, I went to Brown and I was very entrepreneurial there. I developed with a friend, we organized some break dance. This is back when it wasn't old school. We called it Fun K Productions. Fun K, funky, right? We did some marketing, and we developed this company with some other folks, and we ended up creating some products that Apple acquired. And then I went to work for Apple, and then I came actually to Los Angeles to be a Coro Fellow. In fact, the guy who organized the Verde Exchange, which is a conference on green businesses at which I just spoke, a moderated panel, he was a Coro Fellow. He was my mentor, David Abel. I then went to a startup to work on this technology called virtual reality. That led to Disney, where I was co-director of the VR group. You heard that I was part of the team that started Idea Lab, and I started a company focused on online community software. I then took off to actually focus on real estate, which was a long-standing plan, but I was asked to work on a project for my old boss at Brown, who currently runs the Clinton Foundation, Ira Magazine. So it was supposed to be a year, very part-time. It turned into a full-time, couple-year gig, but great work. And then finally, I was able to focus on LivingHomes. So when I kind of hunkered down to focus on real estate, my thesis for a business came very quickly. I said, there's an increasing number of people who really value great design in their products. And I don't mean this as a styling exercise. I mean, they want great form and functionality, right? So these are people buying Michael Graves products at Target and buying, using Apple products and buying pieces from Design Within Reach, or probably a little bit more at IKEA, and reading Wired or Dwell. And these consumers, and they're variously called the cultural creators, we're a growing group, also value products that are built in a healthy and sustainable way, right? So we're driving Priuses, and we're buying the organic food at Whole Foods, maybe even Walmart now, or organic cotton. But the production home builders, the KB Homes, Lennars, Pulte, Syntexes of the world, they don't build homes yet for these consumers. So I said, I'm going to start a company to build homes for the cultural creative. So our formula is pretty simple. Just we get world-class architects, we integrate an extremely comprehensive environmental program, and we use factory production or prefabrication to do what we're doing better, quicker, cheaper, and with smaller ecological footprint. So our first architect, Ray Cathy. Ray is an architect's architect. He just one of my favorite all-time architects. He started SciArc just down the street. He is a modernist, and these are some of the standard homes that Ray is designed for us. And they have kind of a lot of things that you would expect, you know, linear, open floor plan, and outdoor in, and flat roofs. But Ray is a rare modernist who really integrates a craftsman-like attention to detail and warmth, which I freely admit that most people who want a home in this country don't want a modern home. But I think there's a growing group of people who do. They tend to be younger, and they're underserved. And those who do want a modern home want a more modern home, even if they weren't necessarily capable of articulating it as such. We're also working with Kieran Timberlake. They were the AIA Firm of the Year last year. They are probably the best firm in the world in terms of doing both modern design, sustainable design, and prefabrication. They're actually doing a big project at UCLA. They won the competition to do the embassy in London not long ago. Quick primer on prefabrication. So prefabrication, before fabrication. So putting things together before they get on site. It's really comprised of 4 major building systems, each of which really describes different markets. So I will talk about them moving from things that happen mostly in the factory to things that happen mostly on site. So the biggest area here are manufactured homes. Manufactured homes have to conform to HUD standards, Housing and Urban Development. There are many limitations. They have to be transportable. They can't be permanently affixed to a foundation. You can't do multifamily. They can't be more than 2 stories, etc. Mobile homes, that's basically what manufactured homes are. Modular homes, which is what we primarily do, have to conform to local building code. There, the home comes in chunks, almost like Legos. And legally, they can't be discriminated against by banks, by cities. In contrast, manufactured and mobile homes can be. Cities can say, you can't do mobile homes in these areas. And banks can say, we won't finance mobile homes. They can't do that with modular. Panelized is where you're building in pieces, typically of walls, and maybe it's structural, maybe it's insulated, in which case it's a SIP, a structural insulated panel. But you have to do much more work on site, millwork and windows, infrastructure. And then kit homes, that's the last area, or major category. That's where pieces are pre-cut and then assembled on site. So those are the major prefab systems. And when prefab works, and I freely admit that prefabrication is not ideal for most building types, maybe pieces, but when it works, it can absolutely improve quality. In California, the state, by the way, permits your building. So in other words, you have to get the building permit from them. They mandate that you build to a higher level of quality. And the reason is that during transport, your modules are subjected to wind shear and vibration. And so the state says you must build a higher quality building, which is to say your tolerances are smaller than the site, the hardware must be of higher gauge, so you get a better quality product. With better quality can come, not automatically, but can come better energy efficiency because it's a tighter envelope, less leakage. You can dramatically reduce construction waste. So the average site-built home, maybe 30–40% of your materials end up in landfill versus maybe 2 to 10% for prefabricated structure because you do shop drawing before you even order your materials, so you more precisely measure what you need. Because it's a central facility, you can store things and reuse them. You can absolutely see a much faster development schedule because typical site-built construction, you're going to first do the foundation work, and only when that's done do you frame it, do the infrastructure, and all that other fun stuff. Prefabrication, as you're doing the foundation, you're working on the structure. So we're able to do homes in half to a third of the time. And then you can have reduced costs with less materials, quicker schedule, coordinating, people in-house who are 9 to 5 guys instead of subs, it can cut down on your costs. So we have a hybrid system. We mostly use modules, but we're also starting to use panels more and more. Modules are great for coordinating a bunch of skilled labor folks, the electrical, plumbing folks, the tile makers. They can all work together in a controlled environment. Harder to do that on site, but it's expensive to ship air. You've got a lot of air you have to ship versus panels ship flat, but then you have to do more work on site. So we're kind of doing things with both. So these are some of our homes at various stages of undress, and I'm going to switch now and show you one of our homes actually being constructed. So I'm going to show you first my home, which is the first home we built, which is in Santa Monica. Foundation was done. This is about 4 years ago. This is obviously time-lapse, but it's 8.5 hours, so it's 1 day. So the home's comprised of 11 modules. They were built about 45 minutes from Santa Monica, about maybe a half hour from here. And here's the first module coming in. Now the kitchen module is going to come in, and you'll note it's got all the cladding and windows and electrical panels. There's my grandmother right there. And now that's the study. We for the first one, we were like, hey, come on in, we're doing this prefabricated. So everybody you see without a hard hat, well, the people with the hard hat are actually doing the work. The other folks are OSHA violations. After this, I never told people what we're doing, although we do stream our installations live. So I'm actually going to switch. So we learned a lot here, and I'll show you not the last home we installed, but the one before that. Now, excuse me, when we build our homes, they come really complete. So this is a home which is currently in Newport Beach. It's actually the first LEED Platinum home in Newport Beach, but we temporarily installed it at the TED conference. So this is a temporary installation. Here's the first module. So my home, 2,500 square feet, 11 modules. This is 2,000 square feet, 4 modules. My home, all finished, all rough plumbing and electrical were installed. This all finished plumbing and electrical, including, that's the kitchen. The appliance is actually installed, all tiles and even grouting, all done. 3 days later, this opened to the TED conference. So really the work is any places where materials cross a mod boundary, we put those on. So some of the cladding, right, is off because it crosses a boundary. And then the utility hookups and all that fun stuff. So now I will show you the more interesting things, which is from what this kind of looks like now. So this is the first home. This is my home in Santa Monica. And this is, if any of you know Ray Cathy, this is just like signature Ray Cathy. And I think one of the most successful things we've done today is not screw up the great design work that our architects do. Just kind of figure out a way not only to build it more efficiently with prefabrication, but this is the first home ever to be certified LEED Platinum. And for those of you who don't know what that means, I'm going to talk about that in a second. But it's a green building certification program. So by getting platinum, that's kind of it signifies that you have done a lot of things to dramatically reduce the energy and water use, to improve the indoor air quality, to use recycled or reclaimed materials. This is how we built in Brentwood, also Ray Cathy. And so I think this is Newport Beach when it was at the TED conference. So what we've been able to really show is that you can build homes that really have a dramatically smaller ecological footprint than standard homes, but do it in a way that really reflects great form and functionality. These are 7 units that we built in San Francisco. This is the first LEED Platinum project, LEED Platinum multifamily in San Francisco. This is Kieran Timberlake. This is Ray Cappy as it looked in October. It's since been installed in Los Altos. This is our first multifamily Ray Cappy. These are computer renderings of what it should look like at the end of the month, actually. This is our first community of living homes. It's being built in Toronto, 4 homes, which is really, frankly, what I'm most interested in, doing communities of homes, because I want to live in a community. So I thought I'd kind of take a step back for a second and talk about, why bother with this stuff. So if you buy the thesis as I do that there is increasing and increasingly negative climate change, and that humans are the major reason why, and that we have a relatively short period of time to dramatically change the way we build products, the way we consume, or the negative impacts will become irreversible and increase even faster. If you buy that thesis, as do I, then the bad news is that buildings that we learn in, play and live in, they're the worst problem. So if we look at total energy consumption in the U.S., the energy required to heat, cool, and light buildings is bigger than industry, it's bigger than transportation. If we look at electricity, it's even more dramatic. And if we look at other kinds of environmental impact, emissions, waste, 40% of all raw materials that are extracted on the planet are used for building materials. So that's kind of the bad news. The buildings are really the worst problem. The good news is, unlike some of the other areas, which frankly I think often get more press, so creating truly cost-effective hybrid or electrical transportation product, creating ethanol process that doesn't compete with food stock. Unlike some of those other areas where they're still working on the science in some cases, the technology, if you will, to dramatically reduce the energy or water use or resource use in buildings, it exists today. You can buy it at Home Depot. The reason it isn't used more widely is just people, the architects, developers, they're just not aware of it. There's myths that it has to cost more. It absolutely doesn't. And also, there's more existing buildings than new buildings, and that's the bigger part of the problem. So, but luckily, in the last stimulus bill, there was a bunch of money put into helping states implement energy efficiency programs. We've seen that happening more and more on a local municipality level. So, so the good news is we are and will increasingly see buildings built in a more responsible way. So, I've talked about LEED. LEED is a green building certification program that gives you points for things you do that makes your buildings more energy or water or resource efficient or better indoor air quality. And based on those points, you can get certified or silver, gold, or platinum. There are different LEED systems for new construction, existing buildings, LEED for homes. We did some analysis, just what are the real implications to LEED certification. This is just a model that we put together, but it's important to understand, while the certification is important, I mean, more important is what it implies, which is creating buildings that use far less resources than non-sustainably built, non-sustainably designed buildings. So, and this stuff's at our website if you're interested. So we use the LEED program for external validation of what we're doing, verification and validation. Time and time again, consumers have kind of shown that if you are a company making any claims about how sustainable you are, how healthy you are, they don't trust you. They want an independent third party to say, we tested you, here's how you do vis-a-vis others. So if you look at the organic food industry, you look at time and market size, it really didn't take off until USDA came up with an organic certification program. It actually didn't take off exponentially until Walmart introduced organic food. But the United States Green Building Council has done that for buildings with LEED. But internally, but LEED doesn't really help. If your goal is to create homes that are as healthy as possible and that minimize ecological footprint as much as possible, then LEED helps you with that, but it doesn't kind of hit things directly. So we internally use something we developed called Z6. We're trying to create homes that have as much as possible zero energy, which is to say they produce what they need from an energy standpoint. Zero water, so we reclaim what we need for irrigation. Zero emissions, which is an indoor air quality issue. Zero carbon, zero waste. So we think carefully about how materials are sourced or how they're created, how they get reused once they have served their useful purpose. And then zero ignorance. So you can do many things to dramatically reduce the ecological footprint of your building, but frankly, if the people who live in your home don't make responsible choices about resources, you can have a big ecological footprint, so we've got to reduce ignorance too. So let me show you some of the things we do, starting with energy. This is the most important area to get right. Your building will use far more power over its useful life than are embodied in the materials used to create that building. So get this right first and foremost. And there are two parts of the problem. One is reduce demand. Try to make it as energy efficient as possible. And then produce what you need in a sustainable way. So to reduce demand, it begins with insulation. You want to create a really tight building envelope, insulate it really well. We do R30 in our walls and R30 or 40 in the ceiling. That's measured insulation. For lighting, we like to use LEDs, light-emitting diodes. They use 1/10 of the power of incandescent, and they're dimmable, and no mercury, unlike compact fluorescents. We like radiant heating. It's a very energy-efficient way to heat. It's healthier. You're not blowing contaminants through the room. It's a nice heat. It rises. And you can preheat it with solar tubes, which are really efficient. We only use Energy Star appliances. We like Bosch as a family. They tend to be the most energy efficient. And then we produce what we need, in some cases, not all, from photovoltaics. We always have photovoltaics. It's just not always for every client 100% coverage. But for half the homes we've done, it's 100% coverage. I should mention we're also doing our first solar thermal, which is in Toronto. For water, which is an increasingly important issue for the world, but many parts of the U.S., not just Southern California. First part, like energy, reduce demand, so low flow fixtures, dual flush toilets, press 1 for number 1, press 2 for number 2, different levels of water, should be self-explanatory. All of our homes come gray water ready, so that's using sink, shower, and bath water for irrigation. We encourage our clients to install cisterns, so that stores stormwater runoff, and you can use that for irrigation. We have a device that checks barometric pressure and humidity, so if it's going to rain, it doesn't irrigate. Emissions is an indoor air quality issue, so there's more and more research that is finding that things like mold and formaldehyde-urea, which are compounds you find in the adhesives in millwork and in carpets, volatile organic compounds that get off gas from paints and stains. More and more research linking those emissions to skin irritation, eye irritation, head irritation, even cancers in some form. So we do a lot to try to minimize indoor air pollution. We use all low or no VOC paints and stains. Steel, we often use no mold issues with steel. When we have a fireplace, we use a fireplace that burns denatured alcohol, so zero smoke and almost no carbon. We've got special fans that take out carbon monoxide in subterranean parking that might leach into the house, and special fans in the bathrooms on motion control that take out moisture before it builds up, which could cause mold in the wood. And then we tend to integrate indoor gardens. We found some research, really cool research that NASA had done on plants that filter indoor contaminants and that produce a lot of oxygen for space stations. So we put those plants in our gardens. And first of all, it's a cool thing for you biophilia fans, but also it creates better air. So that's part of the system too. To reduce carbon and waste, we think very carefully about where materials come from. And actually, before I even get to that, so many projects that we do have existing structures. We won't demolish the structures. We have a partnership with the reuse people and Habitat for Humanity. So we actually get an audit for our customers of the reusable components of their existing buildings. We have it deconstructed, and then the materials donated to Habitat for Humanity. So we've done it, I think, 5 times. On average, we've been able to reuse about 70% of the materials. It ends up costing people about twice as much as demo, and it takes longer, but you get a tax deduction, and in all cases, it's basically worked out to 0 cost versus demo, which would be money out and a lot of bad karma, because all that material goes to landfill. So that's one thing we do to reduce carbon waste. 2, carefully sourced materials. So steel, which I mentioned we use a lot, is the most recycled building material. It's basically old cars. When we use wood, we try to source Forest Stewardship Council certified wood. FSC, they're a nonprofit that certifies, literally inspects plantations to ensure that wood is grown and harvested in a sustainable way. We have countertops from recycled glass and mirrors. We've got tiles from 100% recycled glass. We mix flash with our concrete, so it makes it flash is what you get when you burn coal, so it makes it a recycled material. And we think carefully about, can a material be reused, we hope, when it's served its useful life, or does it have to be landfilled, which we really try to avoid. So it's a kind of a cradle-to-cradle perspective. One cool thing we do, which I think is important, that cuts across a bunch of things here, homes generally are elegantly designed to adapt to people's changing lifestyle needs. So you're single, you get married, you have a kid, you have more kids, the in-laws move in. Generally, you're either moving or you're doing renovation, which is a torturous process. I've done it. It's expensive, it takes a long time, much longer than you're led to believe. You waste a lot of materials. So as options, we have things that make the home's adaptability easier. So movable walls for the bedrooms that open and close so that you can close them as you need them. As an option, instead of closets, movable millwork storage units that you can move around and configure spaces. Internal or external space that you can expand. So if I ever need a private 4th bedroom, I can put a floor plate and 2 wall plates and create an expanded 4th bedroom. Or here in Timberlake homes, you can actually add rooms to them. So these are things we do to make the home more adaptable, which is good for our clients. It costs them less to make changes, but far less resource waste too. So I'm actually going to switch. I mentioned, I talked about 5 of the 6 things we do to try to minimize our ecological footprint. Does anybody here drive a hybrid or Prius? Well, what's your gas mileage?
30. I don't know. I spend $20 every 2 weeks. It's cheap.
Yeah, so you just know 30. You don't know it exactly.
Mm-mm.
All right, you kind of screw this up.
54 when I'm trying.
Okay, 54 what? Do you know the 10th?
The 10th? No.
10th of a gallon?
If you borrow 41.
Okay, see, I won't embarrass anyone else, although you embarrass me a little bit, but most people don't know their mileage, and if you do know it, you definitely don't know it to the 10th. Now, the reason why we pre-I drivers, if I may make that plural, know this is that, and some of the other hybrids, there's this ingenious device that gives you real-time feedback on your mileage. Any system with feedback tends to improve. Any of you engineering students know that. And this thing becomes like a video game to us. We just want to see that number get as much as possible. That's a very impressive figure. Mine's more like 40.1. And so I wanted a system like that for our homes. I found this company, which I ultimately invested in, called Lucid Design Group, that was developing these systems for commercial buildings. And we worked on them for a system for our homes. So this is actually what's happening in my home right now. So this is how much power we're producing versus using. We can look at what happened last week, how much power was produced versus used. Cool. So looks like over the weekend it was maybe 50-50. Truth be told, I was out of town, but we can look at payback. So this is for the photovoltaic system. So I'm actually halfway through paying off that system. I've saved 41,000 pounds of carbon that would have otherwise been emitted into the atmosphere if I didn't have photovoltaic, since it's installed 4 years ago. So this is available over the internet, and this is something we do to get people to be more conscious of their resource use. Studies have shown that systems like this can reduce energy up to 20%, just making people more conscious of how their usage impacts data. Now, one thing I should share with you, which I somewhat hesitate to do because it might discourage you from encouraging your folks to get a system. The implications of this are that when they're out of town, they can see if you're having a party in the house because of the energy use. So I don't know, just I feel obligated to let you know that. So that's actually it for the prepared remarks, but I'm happy to answer questions about any of this stuff. Yeah, I can track water too, yep, and gas.
And is there an actual real-time display system for
that was real time
for the water as well?
Yeah.
Okay. Are there displays in the house also, so that while you're...
It's internet-based. You can get it on any computer.
What's your business model for the company?
Sell homes and try to sell them for more than it costs us to build them.
How is your mechanism by which you sell homes to individuals, through the sales force, to developers?
Both, yeah. So we've done a couple developer projects, and we're also selling to individuals. I mean, originally I wanted to develop as well as sell to individuals, and we in fact acquired some land, but obviously famously bad time to develop. So, but we'll do that when the timing's right. So right now, just people come to us. We haven't spent one penny on advertising. Our only marketing activities are a website, and we have presented, well not presented, we've exhibited at some conferences. We've been very fortunate. We get a ton of press because our homes tend to be, people like the look, certainly from an environmental standpoint. We tend to be the first LEED platinum. We've done 9 platinum projects, with 3 more about to get certified. So they tend to get covered a lot. So that's been good for us. We had our best year last year and our first profitable year, but I don't, it's ugly out there for home builders, for architects. I don't take any of it for granted.
What is your average price per square foot versus like a typical stick-built house?
Yeah, so, I mean, for us, our average price per square foot is $250 to $350 a square foot, but, how's that compare? I mean, in Los Angeles, hard to do anything for less than $250 a square foot, but frankly, for most of the country, that's really expensive. So we're working hard on trying to bring costs down. There's no rocket science here. In general, half the home's cost are the materials, so expensive materials in, expensive building processes, expensive price out. Plus, we're not building in big volumes. We installed 11 homes last year, which is unbelievable for us, but that's a rounding error to a production builder. Until we get bigger volumes, that's also it's going to be harder for us to reduce costs. But we do have a much lower price line that we're working on that we hope to introduce soon.
Okay, I wanted to ask, for your LEED platinum homes, are you using only solar panels to get that energy and atmosphere credit, or is there any other technology which are using for renewable sources?
Yeah. So, for residences, there really are only 3 systems that have any kind of price performance that are in reach. Photovoltaics to create power from the sun, solar thermal to heat water, and then wind. Unfortunately, in many cities, you can't do wind. You can't. It's a noise issue. It's a height issue. Solar thermal makes a lot of sense in some places. So you can do certainly solar water heating here, but solar thermal, which is going into the ground to use the fact that wherever you go in the world, there tends to be a constant temperature 10 feet below the surface. So you can use that either to cool or warm a building, depending upon what you need to do. But it tends not to be so cost-effective in Southern California, but we are doing that in Toronto. So around here, photovoltaics is the major solution.
You talked about building sustainable communities, but are you thinking about apartment complexes at all? Is that in the
So
plan?
we've done, well, I showed you 2 multifamily, right? And they're rentals.
Okay.
Actually rentals. The 7-unit is in San Francisco, and the 3-unit is in Los Altos. Those are small numbers, but you know the game is now that we've done that, hopefully developers will say, all right, let's try you doing 3 times that number. I mean, we aspire to do things in the hundreds, but you know you got to walk before you run. And again, we are doing all this in an extremely hostile environment to new construction. So you know we right now. Like most architects and builders, our ambitions are certainly greater than the market reality in many cases. But we're doing okay.
How do you determine which architects you want to design your buildings, and at what point in the process do you bring them in, or do they approach you, or how does that work?
You know, we've been proactive, and people have come to us. I mean, we're only working with 2. We have a lot of interest from architects. I guess the main thing, you know, going back to like demand, it's not like we're just selling them as fast as we can build them. So there's not a driving motivation to add lots of new architects. But I mean, the main thing that we've learned is like it's not easy to do what we're doing. Probably another reason why we're not developing. Like, I mean, I came in, you know, Mr. Entrepreneur guy. I've had some base hits. I've had some failures, but so I thought most outside of infill. People who do residential housing either do land development, so they focus on entitling the land and getting it ready, and then builders come in and build the buildings. They tend to be different companies, unless you're really large, like a KB Home, Lenore, and I thought, we'll do both, you know, just be smarter. Well, man, you know, it turns out it's hard to do the building part of what we're doing, to sort of innovate by design, innovate by environmental program, innovate by building process. Oh, by the way, the worst real estate downturn in history. So we kind of hunkered down on the building side. But you know, we'll circle back to development in time. What did you ask? Because I forgot. Did I answer it?
Yeah, I did answer.
Okay, cool.
Hi, two questions. First, how do you get around the design limitations of precast systems as they are today?
How do I get around design?
The precast systems, the design limitations of them.
You know, you sort of work with it. I mean, you know, it's probably be a pretty high geek coefficient discussion to talk about specifics, like, you know, what do we do to deal with specific issues? And by the way, I'm not the right guy to talk about that. Some of the architects at work. But I mean, look, in general, prefabrication wants to do things in volume. That's what it does best. It doesn't like doing one-offs. Any kind of production process wants to do the same kind of thing again and again. So conceptually, we're just trying to figure out ways to standardize details so that we don't have to, for every project, rethink that. So that's probably the easiest way to answer. You have 3 questions?
Well, Adelaide taught me to think critically of thinking. That sounds too good to be true.
I'm sorry?
I have to ask you this. Adelaide went into the SBL.
I'm sorry, I have no idea what you're saying. What, did you ask a question?
No, I didn't ask a question.
Oh, okay.
But your numbers seem, your templates seem amazing, and the fact that you bought some installation and you start appliances are very expensive. I'm just wondering, what is your return on this?
What's our return on?
What's your return for your business model? Are you seeing a healthy number and a healthy growth?
Well, yeah, we had our best year last year. You know, don't want to talk about specific numbers, but and our first profitable year. Are we hitting the margin we'd like to get? No, but again, we're profitable, which in our market is like an IPO, you know. And we're doing okay. I mean, this should be a decent year for us, but again, I don't take any of it for granted. It's still a very punishing market in real estate. But I mean, I've had some base hits and I've had failures, and so the one thing about being an entrepreneur with any level of experience is like you sort of understand you're going to hit and miss. Certainly the venture capitalists understand that, who might invest in your company. I didn't accept any venture capital money. I raised $32 million in my last company. I lost it all. Many of those people invested again in this company. I think they did because they said, you know, they understand that's part of the process. But I didn't do a venture capital deal because real estate is different from venture capital. We're not going to probably go IPO. Maybe we'll get acquired. That happens. But actually, real estate companies can spin off a lot of cash. So I'm just focused. This is like old school. I'm like trying to make it with cash flow. We are cash flow positive. Just trying to be profitable. And you know, frankly, part of the strategy is to survive. We're learning a lot. We're doing more projects. You know, 2 years ago we finished 1 home. Last year we finished 11 homes. So you know that looks good. And we're getting smarter. And I understand where we want to head, which is our original vision. We just want to make this stuff more accessible, which is mostly about pricing. So, you know, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with 1 step. So that's where we're headed.
What was the process you took to turn it from an actual, like a concept when you first started to in your first home to the actual building itself?
I like to create business plans that are almost like raw operating plans. I mean, it's like way too much. But that's what I like to do. I'm just comfortable with that. So I sort of, you know, boil the ocean. Just particularly this, because I was coming out of a completely different industry. And a lot of my friends were like, "You're crazy. You know, why don't you just stay in tech? You've, you know, done okay. Keep doing that." But you know, this is my interest, and so I spent a year working on a business plan. Very big, comprehensive, and then I brought in some trained professionals who knew what they were doing. Right? I knew it. I mean, that's like key thing. Like figure out what you're good at, and get people who are good at doing what you need, like way better than you. So did that too, and I invested. I was like our first investor, which really began with the product. Like I paid for the home. That was R&D, you know, that was our first home. I made some mistakes. I don't have any, you know, customers to bitch shit me because it's me. I just, you know, bummer that I have to deal with some of the mistakes. But we succeeded more than we failed with the first home. And, you know, in software, you tend to get things right about your 3rd release. Like that's when Microsoft started to get Windows right. So, you know, we've done now 13 of these things. We're starting to get it right, you know.
We talk a lot about product and purpose, and what's the purpose of Red and Ben & Jerry's. And my only argument to that is it's social awareness, and social awareness from the masses, which can be really powerful. So if we're talking about like environmental change and really trying to help the environment, I love your homes. I think they're gorgeous and super modern, which I like personally. But are there plans in the future for your company to kind of like retrofit old buildings, or you know, reach out into communities to really make it accessible? I know that's in the plan, but accessible to really the communities that can't necessarily afford it, and to really create change here with the environment.
Yeah. So first of all, let me be clear. As I said, I'm very psyched about Project Red. I'm very psyched about Ben & Jerry's. I'm very psyched about nonprofit groups like Sierra Club and NRDC and many others that I support, Wilderness Society. I'm just talking about what I'm interested in.
Right.
I'm interested in companies that wed profit and purpose. I mean, when I say interested, maybe that's what I want to do with my businesses. So I was just talking about a specific niche and trying to explain that, not in any way deriding, you know, other things. And you know, in terms of us, I mean, I have a hard time focusing, and like one of the key, you know, Startup 101 is like focus, focus, focus. And Bill Gross, who started Idea Lab, told me once, because he too is struggling with focus. He said, you don't really know you're focused until it pains you to say no. Like that's when you begin to know you're focused. And by pain, it's like, not you're like, oh, I wish I could do that, I'm not going to do it, I'm a bummer. But it's like, shit, you know, you really want to do that. You know, then maybe you're starting to get focused. Yes, there are lots of other things you can do, but we're just going to get really good at doing new homes. We do renovation services. We do have a service group. So we are starting to do that, but mostly I want to see like, so what are some of the inspirations? Like, a product like the Mini or VW Bug back in the day. Now there's nothing sustainable about those, but those were really breakthroughs of design and price value in their time. I mean, I'd love to see us do that for home, and because you guys haven't asked, but I know some people are thinking, well, you're just doing homes for wealthy people. That's thank God. I mean, we're starting there, higher margins, better margin for error. VW didn't start out with a Bug, so that we can learn what to do, and then hopefully with better market and better knowledge, we can really come out with products that will have much more of an impact because they're much more cost effective, more people can afford it, it gets out there more.
So I guess to kind of tie that into also the fact that now you're making a profit, are you worried about competitors coming into the market and sort of replicating what you've accomplished? Is that what you want? Because then it spreads awareness and actually helps improve the amount of sustainability in homes?
Yeah, the housing market, for better or worse, is incredibly fragmented. So the top 10 guys 2 years ago, I don't know about last year, but 2 years ago, KB Home, Lennar, Pulte, Syntax, they were maybe 20% of the market. The market was about $250 billion, $220 billion for new homes. They were 20% of that. Like, I'm not familiar with any multi-$100 billion market that's so fragmented. Like almost every other market, the top 5 guys tend to be the majority players. Look at tech, look at healthcare, so there isn't a Microsoft Windows yet in this space, and frankly, I'm not even thinking that, like something that just has great domination. In a multi-$100 billion market, you can be a rounding error, 1%, and have a billion-dollar business. I'm okay with that, we do have competitors, and we've inspired a lot of people. I mean, I'm not being boastful. I hear that a lot. I think it's true. Certainly, we get blogged about and tweeted and all that fun stuff a lot. And it's not. I mean, I think we're just not, as I said, screwing up great design. So like that sells. Great design, built responsibly. I think that's important, and then that's us. So I'm not worried about competitors. I'm worried about us not continuing to execute. Other people will do it too. Other questions?
You work international now, Steve, but you're still fabricating out of Southern California in an exclusive factory? Or?
No, we fabricate local to where we're building. In Canada, we're fabricating in Canada. In Northern California, we have a Northern California fabrication. We are working with a plant in Utah for Southern California, so it's not like it's always right next door, but we try to source locally.
Do you lose efficiencies then starting in a new factory for each?
Absolutely.
So you're not?
Yeah, it is what it is. I mean, if we were only doing one in that location, that would be, kind of a bummer to make that investment. But if we're assuming we're growing a market, we're going to do, as we get stuff done in that market and more people see it, we'll probably sell more, then putting in that work will be good for us.
So all of your talent is one-off each time then? Or does the talent travel? The people that are experienced at building these in factory?
Oh no, each factory, well, we've worked with some factories multiple times, but different factories we have to work with. But we're taking plans and details and stuff that we've learned to those places.
When you're reaching out to potential clients, is there a scenario that you present to them in terms of, okay, there's this timeline, whether it's 5 to 10 years, that total energy savings that you can accomplish can actually offset the premium of building it?
No, we don't get into that. I mean, look, you can save, here's a bad end of like, if you're paying $200, $300 for energy, that's a lot. Like, you see that. But, what is that? That's $3,000, $4,000 over a year. Like, we can't make economic arguments. Like, you're going to pay for the premium on the homes. But again, depending upon, if you're building in Los Angeles or San Francisco, like our homes, it's hard to build anything for much less than we charge. But, we're doing a project in, well, what would be the best example? Actually, every project we have, well, Toronto, we're probably a little more expensive than what you could do other things. We can't justify it by what you save in energy, but we're always cost effective versus doing the same kind of thing. And that's where you've got to compare apples to apples. Are you doing an architecturally significant LEED platinum home? Like, what's that cost? Not, are you just doing an ordinary home, non-architectural, non-environmental program? Because that's generally, not always, but generally going to be cheaper. All right, well, we have internships. Sadly, most don't pay, but sometimes they do. We've hired a number of our interns to be full-time, so at livinghomes.net under company employment, you can find out if we're looking for a marketing intern, product management, architecture, and environmental intern. So thank you very much. Guys,
quick announcements. There's a garbage can to the right. It's probably going to get full. So we have garbage bags on the side of the room I'll bring over. Just so you know.
Really cool.
Our next lunch really quick is February 24th at 12:30 with Mark Fox. He's the Executive Director of GS Sustain.
I don't know.
They look at alternative factors when for investment opportunities such as social governance. So thank you so much for coming. Get a chance to sign in, that'd be great.
It was like 2,000 square feet. The home that's what? That's 500.
How big is 2,000 square foot home? Is that 2 stories?
I don't really know. I think it's 5,000 probably 2 stories. 2,000 is probably just 1 story. I don't know. Something like that. It's not really.